Greetings, Resident Evil fans. I am John of Video Games in the World, and another Halloween has arrived once more. So for this month, it's time to get our scares on. 25 years ago, a game series was born. A game that involves killing zombies and monsters that are not supernatural, but made by scientific experiments gone wrong due to corporate greed and internal machinations and desire for power. Inspired by George A. Romero's Living Dead series, this game would wow many gamers all over the planet and gave birth to the survival horror genre. This series would spawn comic books, novels by S.D. Perry, 6 live-action movies, CG movies, and a CG TV show on Netflix, and a brand new live-action movie reboot coming soon. This is the history of Resident Evil. Resident Evil, also known as Biohazard in Japan, is a successful franchise created by Capcom. The franchise follows a story about biological weapons and viral incidents that causes people and animals to turn into the living dead that feed on the living. This series is the very first one to introduce a genre known as survival horror. As the series progressed, so did its gameplay by involving third-person and first-person shooter games. The Resident Evil series was such a success that it spawned 6 live-action films, CGI movies, comics, a Netflix series, manga, novels, audio drama, and tons of merchandise as well. The development of the game first began in 1993, when Capcom's Tokuro Fujiwara asked Shinji Mikami and other co-workers to create a game with the same style as Fujiwara's successful 1989 title Sweet Home, a video game based on the Japanese horror film of the same name. It served as a main inspiration for Resident Evil. Resident Evil was originally planned to be a remake of Sweet Home directed by Shinji Mikami, with Fujiwara acting as his main producer. Fujiwara believed the basic premise for Resident Evil was to do the things he was unable to include in Sweet Home, particularly in the sense of graphics. Unfortunately, Capcom had lost the rights to Sweet Home, so they had to create a brand new universe, yet it still adopted many elements from Sweet Home, such as limited inventory, scattered health items, scattered notes, puzzles, backtracking, etc. What also inspired this series was the late George A. Romero's Living Dead series of movies, mainly Dawn of the Dead. Ironically, Romero would direct the advertisement for Resident Evil 2 with the late Brad Renfro as Leon Kennedy and Adrienne Frantz of Bold and the Beautiful fame as Claire Redfield. Sweet Home's influence carried further into the series than just the first game. It also inspired Resident Evil 0, which allows the player to switch between characters and will drop items anywhere on the map for the character to pick up. Sweet Home's QuickTime events are considered a precursor to those seen in Resident Evil 4 and beyond. Resident Evil 7 also shares similarities to Sweet Home, including the plot of a film crew going to an abandoned house, a paranormal female presence in the house, and a tragic tale involving a family that once lived there. It also pays homage to Sweet Home in a side story told through a VHS tape. Peter Tyras of Kotaku blamed the decline of critical acceptance on modern Resident Evil offerings on Capcom, abandoning the basic gameplay design laid out in Sweet Home. Resident Evil. The very first Resident Evil game was first released in 1996 on the PlayStation. A year later, a new version known as Director's Cut was released and also on PC. 6 years later, the first game will be remade with updated graphics for the Nintendo GameCube. The remake would also go to other consoles such as the PlayStation 3 and PS4, respectively. The first game had scared many gamers worldwide, and as of 2012, the main series had sold over 50 million units worldwide. The original Resident Evil game puts players in the role of either Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine. Jill Valentine is often used for first-time players, while Chris was used by players who already beat the game with Jill and are seeking a challenge. It all begins in 1998 when those grisly murders occur in the Arklay Mountains in the outskirts of Raccoon City, in a mansion located in the forest. Bravo Team was first to go to investigate these brutal and cannibalistic murders, but Alpha Team lost contact. Alpha Team headed to rescue Bravo Team, but what waited for them was a gruesome nightmare beyond all imagining. When they are pursued by ravenous dogs, they take refuge in a mansion only to discover that it's populated by walking corpses and monsters. Soon, the team discovers that these murders are the fault of a secret viral experiment which was created by an international pharmaceutical enterprise, Umbrella Inc. The objective of the game is to uncover the mystery of the mansion and ultimately escape alive. The game's graphics consist of real-time 3D polygonal characters and objects, superimposed over pre-rendered backdrops with predetermined camera angles. The player controls the character by pushing the D-pad or analog stick left or right to rotate the character, and then move the character forward or backwards by pushing the D-pad up or down. To fulfill the game's objective, the player uncovers various documents that provide exposition about the game's narrative, as well as clues that help them solve various puzzles within the mansion. Key items are also available that give the player access to other items or new areas. The player can arm their character with weapons to defend themselves from enemies. Although the ammunition available for each firearm is limited, and the player must learn to conserve the ammunition they have for situations where they really need it. To restore the character's health, the player uses first aid sprays, or 3 types of healing herbs that can be mixed together in different combinations for different healing effects. The carrying capacity of the player is limited depending on the character, and items that the player does not wish to carry at the moment can be stored into an item box to be retrieved for later use. To save their progress, the player must pick up an ink ribbon and use it on any of the typewriters scattered through key locations in the game. However, the supply of ink ribbons the player can acquire is limited, much like the player's ammo and healing supplies. In Jill's story, she and Barry are investigating the mansion while searching for their lost companions. As for Chris, he encounters rookie member of Stars Bravo, Rebecca Chambers, while searching also for lost companions. In the original game, the intro and ending scenes were live action, portrayed by real-life actors. Most people who played the original game remember the humorous dialogue and voice acting that the live and voice actors made, such as...
Oh, Barry!
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
Investigate the dining room again.
Okay, then I'll...
But the GameCube changed all of that. Since every scenario was CG rendered, the remake of the game introduced new areas of the mansion and also a new boss such as Lisa Trevor. Most gamers would say that the GameCube version is scarier, others would beg to differ. Released on January 21st, 1998 on the PlayStation, then the following year for the N64, and for the Dreamcast in 2000, and for the GameCube in early 2003. This is a sequel to the original Resident Evil released in 1996 on the PlayStation, and it is considered to be the most popular game in the horror genre. It has wowed and scared many die-hard Resident Evil fans worldwide, and also a target of controversy due to its high level of graphic violence and gore. 2 months have passed since the Spencer Mansion incident in the Arklay Mountains. People have started to return to their normal lives, but then things take a turn for the worst. The T-virus has spread throughout the city and it is under quarantine by the US government. A rookie police officer, Leon S. Kennedy, arrives in the city for his first assignment, while Claire Redfield heads to the city in search of her lost brother, Chris Redfield. They do not know of the outbreak until they enter the city. Soon, when they meet, they find themselves fighting for their lives and searching for survivors and escape the city. But it's only the beginning of their worst nightmare. The gameplay of Resident Evil 2 has elements that of the original game, such as obtaining weapons, healing with mixed herbs, saving the game, putting away items in the box, reading files that can solve puzzles and discover truths about certain characters, and Umbrella Inc. as well. CGI sequences have replaced the live-action scenes of the original game, but during gameplay, characters are rendered in 3D polygons. In the beta version of the game, Leonis Kennedy was included. However, there was a character called Elsa Walker who was a motorcyclist, but in no way she was related to Chris. However, in the remake, Elsa Walker's costume will be used for Claire as well in the remake. In the PlayStation version, the game is divided by 2 CDs. Disc 1, where you can play as Leon. Disc 2 is where you can play as Claire. Scenarios are divided between A and B, and whoever you choose to be the game as first, the other character will begin Scenario B. Music is much more suspenseful and eerier as well. Resident Evil 2 was also the first game to introduce a minigame when beating the game in a certain time. The game is titled The Fourth Survivor. It is a minigame where a character dressed in a biosuit named Hunk, now in possession of one of the samples of the G-Virus, must escape from Raccoon City, eliminating and dodging several threats in his way. Unlike most minigames, The Fourth Survivor is canon, which tells the story of Hunk as the fourth survivor of the events of the Raccoon City incident.
It's sheer perfection.
21 years later, Resident Evil 2 will be remade with the RE engine used for Resident Evil 7. The remake had new gameplay elements, new story elements such as Sherry being captured by Brian Irons, new areas, and so on. The remake demolished expectations and was critically and commercially successful. Players can obtain sub-weapons such as knives, frag grenades, and flashbangs. However, knives can end up breaking when used so much. The remake had 3 difficulty settings: Assisted, Standard, and Hardcore. In Assisted mode, the player has aim assisting. Enemies are weaker and is able to regenerate a certain amount of health without the need for herbs and first aid sprays. Standard mode is considered normal mode where there is no aim assisting. Enemies are a bit stronger, and to recover health, players need to use herbs and first aid sprays. Hardcore mode is for players who have already completed the game and are seeking a greater challenge. Enemies are far more stronger and deadlier, and to save the game they must use an ink ribbon on the typewriter, much like the classical titles, as autosave is removed entirely. Leon and Claire's original renders and costumes will be included as downloadable content, as well as the original music and sound effects from the original Resident Evil 2, much to the joy of veterans of the series. The Fourth Survivor also makes a return in the remake along with other minigames that allows you to play as Robert Kendo, Mayor Warren's daughter, and one of Hunk's teammates. Originally released for the PlayStation on November 11, 1999, then on PC in 2000 and for the GameCube in 2003. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis is the final Resident Evil game to appear in the PS1, since most of the games in the series would move to the GameCube and the PlayStation 2. This game is considered to be as scarier as its predecessor, Resident Evil 2. However, in chronological storyline, this game takes place a day before the events of Resident Evil 2. 2 months have passed since the mansion incident in the Arklay Mountains, and a day before Resident Evil 2. The T-Virus breaks out in Raccoon City, infecting almost the entire population. The police try to take over the situation. Unfortunately, they are overpowered. Jill Valentine bursts out from her apartment to escape the city. Along the way, she encounters with UBCS soldier Carlos Oliveira, and they decide to team up in order to escape the nightmare. However, they are stalked by a juggernaut creature known as Nemesis, whose sole purpose is to track down and eliminate all STARS members, since they have become a threat to Umbrella's plans. Gameplay is pretty much the same, but also we are introduced in this game to making ammunition with gunpowder, life selection sequence, a 180-degree spin, and dodging before being attacked as well. Players take the role of Jill Valentine, and in one part of the game, they can get to play as Carlos. At all times in different parts of the game, Nemesis will be there to stalk Jill, and when found, it will try to kill her. Nemesis is highly remembered for muttering stars. As far as combining ammo goes, the gunpowders are labeled with A, B, and C. A-type gunpowder is handgun bullets, B-type gunpowder is shotgun shells, and C-type gunpowder is grenade bullets for grenade launcher. C-type gunpowder is created by mixing A and B together. The more times these ammo are mixed, players create enhanced ammo. If 3 C-type gunpowders are created, then they can create magnum bullets. Another gameplay feature is the live selection mode. When players find themselves in a tight situation such as being cornered by the Nemesis or zombies, they must select before time runs out, such as running away or being forced to fight. Another minigame is introduced in which you can choose to play as Carlos, Nikolai, and Mikhail, called The Mercenaries. The Mercenaries is a minigame that will be seen in future games such as Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6. In the minigame, you have been implanted a bomb in your body and you must reach the target point, which is a warehouse at the beginning of the main game, and there will be various menaces in your way. The game will be over if time runs out or if killed. Time rises up when killing zombies, dodging, and even killing Nemesis as well. With an A grade, players can make so much more money, thus unlocking new weapons and infinite ammo for all the weapons in Resident Evil 3. Special costumes for Jill are unlocked after beating the game, such as Jill's original outfit, Regina's outfit from Dino Crisis, and a policewoman as well. After beating the game in hard mode, players unlock epilogues of various characters, such as Chris, Jill, Leon, Claire, Barry, Ada, Hunk, and Sherry. Resident Evil 3 also had the remake touch in 2020, with new gameplay elements and new story elements. Unfortunately, it did not receive the success that its predecessor had. Resident Evil Code Veronica X is the 4th installment in Capcom's Resident Evil franchise. The game takes place 3 months after the Raccoon City incident, and continues the story with Claire Redfield, who continues the search for her brother Chris. The game was first released on the Dreamcast in 2000, and an updated version for PS2 and the GameCube was released in 2001 as Code Veronica X, featuring new scenarios that were not included in the Dreamcast version of the game. Code Veronica X will also be re-released for the PS3 and the PS4. 3 months have passed since the Raccoon City incident. The peaceful town has been destroyed by a nuclear missile due to the outbreak of the virus that was instigated by Umbrella. Claire Redfield since that time continued to search for her brother Chris and infiltrates an Umbrella compound in hopes to find him, but was caught and imprisoned in Rockford Island. However, she is released from her cell by the warden and discovers that the island has been contaminated by the T-virus outbreak, turning prisoners and officers into zombies and monsters. She joins with a fellow inmate named Steve Burnside and fight to escape the island. But there are more horrors outside of the island as well. Code Veronica is the first Resident Evil game in the main series to use 3D backgrounds instead of the traditional pre-rendered ones. Despite this, the camera does not follow the player around, but swings between semi-fixed angles, and the skyboxes are pre-rendered. However, 2 weapons in the game can be fired from the character's point of view. First-person view mode is also available in the game's unlockable battle game minigame. Gameplay remained largely unchanged from Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, features such as explosive oil drums and a 180-degree turn having been carried over to this game, though the dodge feature was removed. Items from Resident Evil 2 such as upgradable handgun parts and side packs to increase carrying capacity are included, as well as new weapons such as crossbow arrows mixed with gunpowder, and anti-bow rounds for the grenade launcher. A feature of Code Veronica is the inclusion of various dual-wielding pistols, allowing the player to target 2 enemies at the same time. Some of the more subtle improvements include the addition of continues, allowing the player to retry a scene after a game over, and the ability to pick up and use a healing herb when the character's inventory is full. However, by retrying the game, that's a penalty point, and players cannot get an A rank, which unlocks new things for the minigame. Code Veronica features 2 protagonists, Chris and Claire Redfield. In the first half of the game, players take control of Claire, and in one part they get to play as Steve Burnside. In the second half of the game, they pick up where they left off with Claire until they can play as Chris. When beating the game, players unlock Battle Mode, in which they can play as Chris, Claire, and Steve, and when beating the minigame in a certain time, they can unlock Claire in a skimpy costume and even Wesker. Steve is unlocked by attending the Luger replica in the main game.
Resident Evil 0.
A year after Code Veronica X, Resident Evil 0 was released. This game served as a prequel to the entire saga, taking players into a story of the events that transpired in the beginning before the mansion incident. On that same year, the original Resident Evil was remade for the GameCube. Resident Evil 0 was originally headed for the N64, but then changed to the GameCube since at that time the GameCube was being released. It was later re-released on the Nintendo Wii and also on the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. The story begins when STAR's Bravo team heads on a mission to investigate a series of grisly murders occurring in the Arklay Mountains. Their chopper suffers an engine failure and they must head on foot. They soon come upon a military police car and a stopped train, and learn about a death row fugitive named Billy Cohen. Rebecca Chambers, a rookie cop in her late teens, enters a train and discovers the horrors inside, as many of its passengers had turned into zombies. She also encounters Billy Cohen, and the two must team up if they are to survive the horrors that await them. The gameplay remains pretty much the same, but it also introduced a new feature. That feature is known as the Partner Sapping System, in which rather than choosing characters to play with, players can play as both Billy and Rebecca. They can switch from Rebecca to Billy, or Billy to Rebecca at any time. When separated, players must find a way to get the characters together in order to progress. The difference between the characters is that Rebecca can mix herbs while Billy cannot. Rebecca is fast and her defense is low, but Billy's defense is high but quite slow at times. The game also does away with the use of boxes placed in fixed locations for the player to store items in. Instead, the player can drop items on the floor to make room for new ones, which they can later retrieve for future use. The locations of dropped items are displayed on the player's map. To conserve ammunition, players must share some of it with their companion. If one companion dies, the game is over. This type of co-op would later be used in Resident Evil 5 and 6. After beating the game, they unlock a minigame called Leech Hunter.
Resident Evil 4.
Resident Evil 4 is the 6th main entry in the series, and the 3rd title to make it to the Nintendo GameCube. It is also the 4th title of the Resident Evil series to make it to the PlayStation 2. Upon its release, Resident Evil 4 demolished all expectations, featuring new style of gameplay, the return of Leon S. Kennedy, new enemies, and deadlier monsters. 6 years have passed since the destruction of Raccoon City and the crushing downfall of the Umbrella Corporation due to its involvement in the viral outbreak. Now, Leon S. Kennedy had received special training and became a government agent for the President of the US. Leon has been recruited for an assignment, which is to rescue Ashley Graham, the President's daughter, from a sinister cult led by Osmond Sattler. What Leon discovers is that the villagers and monsters are caused by a parasitic disease known as Las Plagas, Spanish for the plagues. The gameplay has changed since Resident Evil Code Veronica X. Now, players get to play in a third-person mode type of shooter, and the genre went from survival horror to action survival horror. Although, some elements like mixing herbs, key items, reading documents, and puzzles have returned. And a new feature is introduced, such as finding treasures and combining jewels to create a better treasure to sell to the merchant for a higher price. The merchant sells weapons, first aid sprays, upgrade weapons, and even special weapons when beating the game for the first time at a much more higher price. Resident Evil 4 shows the inclusion of context-sensitive controls. Based on the situation, the player can interact with aspects of the environment, such as kicking down a ladder, jumping out a window, or dodging an enemy attack. There are also quick-time events in which the player must press buttons indicated on screen to execute actions, such as dodging a falling boulder or wrestling an enemy to stay alive. These are often incorporated into the game's many boss battles, where the player must avoid instant kill attacks. Resident Evil 4 has 3 minigames seen in the PS2 version. The Mercenaries, which Leon, Ada, Wesker, Krauser, and even Hunk himself are playable characters. In the Mercenaries, if every character has 6 stars, a new weapon known as a hand cannon is unlocked, and also a weapon that is similar to Mega Man's. Assignment Ada is a minigame that has a non-canon story where Ada must obtain various Plaga samples while fighting or avoiding infected commandos, and at the end fighting against the infected Jack Krauser. Separate Ways is a minigame which tells Ada's story during the main game, where she randomly encounters Leon and works for Albert Wesker to obtain the Plaga sample from Sattler. The main enemies of the game are infected violent villagers known as Los Ganados, Spanish for the cattle. Los Ganados can dodge, wield melee and projectile weapons, and are capable of working collectively and communicating with each other. They were once simple farmers until becoming the product of an infestation known as Las Plagas. They are all part of Osmond Sattler's cult known as Los Iluminados, Spanish for the Enlightened Ones. Resident Evil 4 was also released on the Wii and PC alongside its 3 minigames that were included in the PlayStation 2 version. There are also new costumes for Leon and Ashley and cutscene browser. In 2011, the game was downloadable on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox Live, later re-released on the PS4 and Xbox One.
Resident Evil 5.
Resident Evil 5 is the 7th installment in the series that was released in 2009 for the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and Microsoft Windows. Resident Evil 5 features a return of Chris Redfield alongside a new partner named Sheva Alomar, and both are sent to investigate a terrorist threat in Kijuju, a fictional region in Africa. Chris soon finds out that he must confront his past in the shape of Albert Wesker. The setting of the game, taking place in Africa, bears a similarity to the Oscar-winning 2001 film Black Hawk Down. 11 years had passed since Raccoon City. Chris Redfield is now an agent working for the BSAA and works alongside Sheva Alomar to investigate a terrorist threat in the Kijuju Autonomous Zone. Upon their arrival, they discover that all the villagers have been infected with Magini parasites and killed the rest of Alpha Team. In intelligence provided by Delta Team's leader Josh Stone, Chris discovers a picture of Jill Valentine, who was presumed dead during a confrontation with Wesker. Now, Chris must find out if his old partner is still alive and finish off his nemesis Wesker once and for all. Resident Evil 5 has the same elements from Resident Evil 4 and previous games, but it also introduces a new feature. That feature is co-op mode, in which players can either play with others or solo if they like. Players can select either Chris or Sheva to play with, and they can exchange weapons, ammo, herbs, and first aid sprays. If one of them is dying, players can save their partner from being killed. Like in Resident Evil 4, players can sell or upgrade weapons, sell treasures and jewels, etc. This game also has minigames such as Lost in Nightmares, which tells the story of Jill's supposedly death during a confrontation with Wesker, and Desperate Escape, in which after saving Jill, she and Joss Stone fight off Magines in order to save Chris and Sheva before escaping the Doom base of Tricell Inc. The minigames can either be downloaded or played in the Gold Edition of the game. Most fans would say that after the 5th game, the series will go on its downfall. Although the game had some degree of success, it was controversial as well. Resident Evil 5 was accused of racism due to the game taking place in Africa due to a white character killing enemies. According to Newsweek editor and Guy Kroll, there was a lot of imagery in that trailer that dovetailed with classic racist imagery, although he acknowledged that only the preview had been released. Takeuchi said the game's producers were completely surprised by the complaints. The second trailer for the game, released on May 31st, 2008, revealed a more racially diverse group of enemies and the African BSAA agent Sheva, who assists the protagonist. Critics felt that Sheva's character was added to address the issue of racism, though Karen Dyer said the character had been in development before the first trailer was released. Takeuchi denied that complaints about racism had any effect in altering the design of Resident Evil 5. He acknowledged that different cultures may have had differing opinions about the trailer, although he said he did not expect there to be further complaints once the game was released and people were able to play the game and see what it is for themselves. In a computer and video games interview, producer Masachika Kawata also addressed the issue. "We can't please everyone. We're in the entertainment business. We're not here to state our political opinion or anything like that. It's unfortunate that some people felt that way."
Resident Evil Revelations.
Resident Evil Revelations was released in 2012 on the 3DS and returned to survival horror, which was absent since Resident Evil 4. The game had returning elements and more emphasis on exploration and puzzle solving. A new device, the Nemesis, detects items in throughout the game's environments. Extra features include Raid Mode, allowing 2 players to cooperate in battling waves of enemies. Players are also able to send in-game supplies to friends via the Street Pass feature of the Nintendo 3DS. The story of the game bridges the gap between Resident Evil 4 and 5, labeling it as an interquel. The story revolves around BSAA co-founders Jill Valentine and Chris Redfield, the heroes of the first Resident Evil. During the game's events, Jill and Parker Luciani are sent to search for Chris Redfield and Jessica Sherrawat on the SS Queen Zenobia that serves as a game's setting. The game's story includes a flashback which revolves around the floating city of Terra Grigia. 1 year prior to the game's events, when the Federal Bioterrorism Commission sent agents, including Parker and Jessica, to keep the situation under control after the bioterrorist organization, Il Vetro, launched an attack on the city using bioorganic weapons in opposition to Terra Grigia's solar energy development. Revelations was later released on the PS3, 360, the Wii U, and also on the PS4 and Xbox One. On February 24, 2015, Resident Evil Revelations 2 was released on the PS4 and PS3, and later on the Xbox One, Xbox 360, and PC. This game featured the return of Claire Redfield and Barry Burton, and also introduces Barry's daughter, Moira, playing a supporting role. Barry is joined by Natalia Corda, a little girl with supernatural abilities. This survival horror had cooperative gameplay and features. Not to forget, it was an episodic video game which consisted of 4 episodes. Despite the game's success, many gamers and fans were not pleased that Alyson Court didn't reprise her role as Claire Redfield. Resident Evil 6 is the 9th installment in the series that was released in 2012 on PS3, PC, and Xbox 360. Later re-released alongside Resident Evil 4 and 5 on the PS4 and Xbox One, as well as alongside Revelations 1. This game is defined as dramatic horror. However, there is disagreement among reviewers whether this installment belonged in survival horror genre. Resident Evil 6 was not well received, thus only getting mixed reviews, which was a downfall of the main series according to many. Yet others believed it was alright and even better than the ill-fated Operation Raccoon City. Gameplay elements from old games including 5 return once again, as well as mini-games such as the Mercenaries. However, players can select 3 different characters: Leon Kennedy, Chris Redfield, and Jake Muller, the son of Albert Wesker. The story is told from the perspective of Chris Redfield, a former member and founder of BSAA traumatized by a failed operation. Leon S. Kennedy, a Raccoon City survivor and agent for the US government. And Jake Muller, illegitimate son of Albert Wesker and associate of Sherry Birkin. And also Ada Wong, a freelance agent framed for the bioterrorist attacks by Neo Umbrella. They must all confront the force behind a massive bioterrorist attack with the newly developed C-virus in cities across the world. Players can pick up items quickly and change weapons in real time. Players are also able to move while aiming their firearms. A niche feature comes in the form of tablets, in which players can recover health at the push of a button. More tablets can be produced by locating herbs. By finding various herbs and saving them before converting, more tablets can be obtained from them. If one player runs out of health, that player will have a short time to try and defend him or herself, while his partner or her partner attempts to revive them. If either player is killed, gameplay resumes at last checkpoint. The game will have several primary enemies, including zombies and the newly introduced Javo. Unlike zombies, Javo are able to interact with each other to plan an attack, use weapons, and heal themselves, much like the Ganados and Illuminados from Resident Evil 4, and also the Kijuju from Resident Evil 5.
Welcome to the family, son.
Resident Evil Biohazard was released on January 24, 2017 on the PS4, Xbox One, and PC. Before its release, a number of demos were released, such as a playable teaser, and later updated game with adding an escape ending and an infected ending. This game, unlike previous titles of the series, is first person rather than traditional third person. But this title was not the first game to go first person, as Resident Evil Survivor and its sequel were the first. The first person gameplay was compared to Konami's tragically cancelled title Silent Hills, which was released as a demo titled PT, or Playable Teaser. Capcom responded to this by pointing out that Resident Evil 7 was in development long before the reveal of PT, and dispelled any rumors about staff of PT having been hired to work on the game. Upon its release, Resident Evil 7 Biohazard received mixed to positive reviews, selling millions of copies worldwide, and as of May 2021, it is considered Capcom's second bestseller of all time. The gameplay is first person and can be playable with a PSVR headset in VR mode. A new guard command which braces your character against attacks to reduce damage but restricts movement, and a crouch button which can be used to avoid attacks. An open inventory button and an open map command which are both navigated in real time. Also, like previous titles, a dedicated use recovery item button but only works with certain items. Unlike previous titles, the game has a limited use of firearms. The firearm mechanics are similar to previous titles of the game, as ammunition is scarce, and certain more powerful weapons require extra effort on a player's part to acquire. Puzzles range from rotating items in order to cast a shadow by matching a symbol. The story of the game is set in mid-2017 somewhere in the southern USA, where there have been ghost sightings around the bayou town of Dulvey. The game proper takes place after the events of Beginning Hour, which ended with the murder of a 3-man TV crew by the infected Baker family members Jack, Marguerite, and Lucas. It features a new protagonist named Ethan Winters, a civilian who offers fewer combat skills than most previous Resident Evil protagonists like Chris, Jill, Leon, and Claire. Ethan is searching for his missing wife, Mia, which leads him to a derelict plantation mansion, home of the Baker family, but what awaits him is a nightmare beyond all comprehension. Other standalone stories of the game include Not a Hero and End of Zoe. Not a Hero has players taking control of Chris Redfield, who is on a mission to wipe out the mold super colony in Dovey, Louisiana, and apprehend Lucas Baker. Fresh from saving Ethan Winters, he receives order to arrest Lucas Baker, who is hiding at the Abercrombie Salt Mine and is involved in illegal bioweapons research. The rest of Redfield's squad has been declared missing after being captured by Baker, and he must rescue them as a secondary objective. End of Zoe takes place immediately after the events of Resident Evil 7. Players take control of Joe Baker, who must save his niece from the mutated Jack Baker. Unlike other characters, Jack uses his melee combat and not firearms, and in order to raise strength of hand-to-hand combat, players must find effigies.
Ethan Winters, welcome.
In life and in death.
Resident Evil Village was released on May 7, 2021 worldwide on every console, including Steam.
You shouldn't be out here. It's not
Upon its release, Village had generally favorable reviews. Phil Hornshaw praised the new direction taken by the game, feeling its notable departure from Resident Evil 7 what was made it work as a sequel, and opined in the game provided an excellent balance of action and scares. The gameplay remains much the same as its predecessor, such as being first person, scarce ammunition, and a new feature is that Ethan can now push enemies, while at the same time avoiding and sometimes confronting the main antagonist of the game, Alcina Dimitrescu. New enemies include lichens and pale zombie-like enemies. The story of the game takes place years after the events of Resident Evil 7, where Ethan and Mia have relocated to Europe with the help of Chris Redfield, the legendary hero of the series. The couple settled down peacefully and had a daughter. However, Chris suddenly disrupts their life, throwing a devastated Ethan into a new twisted nightmare in search of answers of why he did it. Resident Evil not only spawned sequels and spin-offs like Operation Raccoon City and Umbrella Corps, which are considered non-canon, and other merchandise, but it also spawned comic books, novels, and movies. Before Paul W.S. Anderson's live-action movie series was made, George A. Romero, known for his Living Dead series, had written a script for the first live-action movie and was more in touch with the source material. Unfortunately, it was scrapped, so they decided to keep Anderson's vision for the movies. Romero's script is still viewable on the internet, however. There were 6 live-action movies written by Paul W.S. Anderson which starred his wife, Mila Jovovich, as a character named Alice. There were also 3 CGI movies, Degeneration, Damnation, and Vendetta, as well as a CGI TV series on Netflix titled Resident Evil Infinite Darkness, bridging the gap between Resident Evil 4 and 5 yet again, much like Damnation itself. A new live-action movie is set to premiere which stars Robbie Amell as Chris Redfield, Hannah John Kamen as Jill, Donald Logue as Barry Burton, and Neil McDonough as William Birkin. The movie is titled Resident Evil: Welcome to Raccoon City. This new film will be separated from Anderson's series of movies and thus considered a reboot. Many would say that the first 2 live-action movies of the Anderson universe were good, but the rest were terrible as they deviated from the source material by turning it into a global zombie apocalypse. Although From Extinction to the Final Chapter movies deviated from the source material, at least they had many creatures from the games and characters like Jill, Claire, Chris, Barry, Leon, Ada, and Wesker. And finally, in conclusion, Resident Evil continues to shine up until this day. I really love the franchise, and like many franchises such as Zelda, Castlevania, Silent Hill, Final Fantasy, Mario, Sonic, Lufia, Uncharted, and Assassin's Creed, Resident Evil holds a special place in my heart. Don't miss the next episode of Video Games in the World, people. Play hard, gamers, and have a good one.